Hello, welcome back to Over the Top, Under the Radar. I'm Carys and
And I'm Gary Young. And this special episode, we have a collection from all of our interviews.
We've been really lucky this year. We've only been running the podcast for a few months, but we've got to speak to some really phenomenally interesting people, from activists like Huda Jawad and Joe Mulhall to Reni Eddo-Lodge, the author, political candidate Faiza Shaheen, Mick Lynch, trade union leader, and Jeremy Corbyn. So in true Christmas style, we've got a selection of some of the highlights from those conversations, some of Gary and I's favourite clips and moments. So Gary, obviously this is not live, but probably lots of people will be listening to this on Christmas week, eating their turkey or other things. We will not be eating turkey in my house. We're anti-turkey. Yeah. What's your kind of go-to Christmas week vibe? Are you in your gym jams? You in a onesie?
Well, in the run-up to Christmas, frantic, right? Particularly because I've got kids and kind of last-minute stuff and, this and that, and what do you mean you haven't got the goose fat for the potatoes? All that sort of stuff. And then immediately Christmas is over. This is my best time of the year, is that period between Christmas and the first sort of Monday of the new year, when nobody really knows what day it is and your personal hygiene goes to shit and you eat quality street for breakfast.
It's a special time of year, it's a time-honoured tradition. I feel like it's quite a British thing. Also, the thing I like is that suddenly meals aren't really a thing. It's just like a day-long meal. Like you're kind of just permanently grazing. Yeah. There's rounds of leftovers. You're like, let me try and make a toasty with a bit of the cheese and a bit of the meat and some cranberry. You come up with inventions, and then you get to the point where you're like, whatever your preferred chocolate brown quality street celebrations used to be a thing in my family. It's like you sort of get to the dregs of those. Like the Twix or the Bounty, and you're like, that's all that's left. And you're like, I'm better than that. I don't need that chocolate. And then it gets to a point where you're like, it's here and I'm in my pajamas. I love that time. It's a special time, recharge.
And you can kind of work yourself up to your New Year's resolutions as well. Cause it's like, well, I've eaten so much chocolate now, I can't go to the gym. Or,
Gyms are closed, Gary.
I've got to do 10,000
reps. You can't go nowhere. You've got to stay inside.
I know. And that kind of, it's that notion of disorientation where it's not quite that capitalism stands still, because there are people working and you're more likely to be working. The less power you have, the more likely you have to be working, frankly. I lived in America for 12 years where you get Christmas. There's no Boxing Day.
Yeah, they don't do
There's
it.
No, the day after Christmas is just the next day.
Like hustling.
And and I kind of, I would find myself really struggling around the 28th, 29th, just thinking, why isn't everybody in their pajamas? Why am I seeing so many people? I do love that.
And I think it's it's not about religion or politics. It's about our right to sit in our pajamas. Yeah, and sloth. When I lived in a house share in Hackney in my 20s, we used to call it the malaise, that kind of just intra Christmas, New Year period. So wherever you're listening, however you're listening, I hope you're in your pajamas right now. And I hope you've eaten too much food and you're watching your preferred Christmas movie. Mine is Die Hard. I've been told it's not a Christmas movie, but I maintain my belief that Bruce Willis.
Didn't Bruce Willis say it wasn't a Christmas
movie? That came up. But you know what? I've just realised it's a Christmas movie to me, and that's all that matters. So I will be, yippee-ki-yay. Yippee-ki-yay, Gary. That's my kind of Christmas. Not doing much, eating too much, and getting to point of crankiness with family because you're all locked up inside together and doing a lot of group socialising. And some people cheat in Monopoly and Scrabble, that makes other people angry. Naming no names. Enjoy our Christmas special, guys.
I want to talk to you a bit about your Irish heritage, because both of your folks are from Ireland.
Yeah.
Your Irish identity is important to you.
Very important. Yeah.
I wonder how that shaped your politics.
A lot. If I'm
particularly
honest.
Given the time when you
So my mother was from the border in the north, but South Armagh, across McGlen, some people will know it. And my father was from Cork City, and they're quite old. People wouldn't believe how old they would be now, but they had to come here in the war. Everyone had to leave Ireland, but there was nowhere else to go because you couldn't go to America or Australia. So I could have been an Irish American in theory, but they met here. And there was a tremendous waves of migration. And Irish people made a big impact on this country, culturally and physically, building it and all the rest of it. And of course, they lived, many of them, cheek by jowl with migrants from the Caribbean, especially in my area, but also people from South Asia. So that changes you. You've got to know the accents. You've got to know where everybody's come from without being a pain, asking them all the time. So my mates in my school were from places like St. Lucia and Dominica, which is different to Jamaican culture, which is the dominant Caribbean culture. Yeah. And you soon found out that people from Dominica and St. Lucia didn't really want to hear about Jamaican culture all the time, because it was the one that was overriding their view of the world. So I was quite tuned into that, and I was really interested in it. And of course, we had the Troubles. So I was born in 62. This was the Troubles in Northern Ireland. 68, it was all going off, and into the early 70s as I was getting more and more mature. And we discussed that a lot. And being Irish, it marked you out as different, but you could assimilate very quickly. If I'm in a pub and I want to be, maybe not now, but if I want to just be the Englishman, I can just do that as well, or be the Londoner.
Do that now?
Well, yeah, but people are going, we know who you are.
Oh, right, no, fair enough. Yeah.
But, it's quite different. You could hear people telling racist jokes all the time or saying this about the Irish, and you take it on board. But equally, I don't know when I ever played it. I think Diane Abbott's remarks, funnily enough, were very accurate. I don't know, most black people, the one about you could be Polish, you could be Irish, you could be ginger, but you'll never know what it's like to be black living in this society. It wasn't put the best way, but
I was going to say,
I know exactly what she means, though.
I know what she meant.
My mates would have told me. In fact, they did tell me that, because I used to go, well, I'm Irish, I understand some of it, and they go, no, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't.
I mean, I do understand.
And it's true. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand what she was saying, but I think that she didn't quite say that.
It was clumsy.
I personally, interestingly, the runner also, I kind of thought it was wrong, but that kind of, but I knew what she meant, and an apology would have been the apology.
But I think it's also the thing of what can you say in print in a national newspaper and what can you say in the pub. And I do think so I grew up in South London, again in like a very mixed working class community, and I think that there is, and I'm not Diane Abbott, she's a politician, she's been in politics. It was a letter to the Observer. I'm not saying it was appropriate.
You make your mistakes and you suffer or get the benefit.
Yeah, but I do think those kind of conversations you can have with friends of different heritage, you do speak a bit more, like, you don't speak in a sort of clipped, formal way, and it is different. And I think the saddest thing is actually that people who grew up in multi-ethnic communities, like, there's a bit more comfort with it. Like, it's not, you're not scared to say, oh yeah, my friend who is black, and like that slightly. So I get what the sentiment might have been. I don't think she expressed it well, but I think you do learn that from growing up with people of different identities, that it's not the same experience.
But in terms of what that means politically and philosophically, so you're not growing up with God Save the King or God Save the Queen as it was. The royal family is our history. You grew up with a different version of history, which makes you I think a lot of Irish people are very interested in history. And if you've got an inquiring mind, that will take you into other groups' history, and even working class history in Britain, which they've been robbed of. I think English people have been denied their own history with the Chartists and the Tolpuddle martyrs, and even Cromwell and the English Revolution and all that. They don't know anything about it. And it's far more likely that an Irish person will know about the English Civil War than an English person from the same background. And I find all that interesting. And they never question the empire and imperialism. Whereas if you're from an Irish background in Britain, you probably will question that, and then it will take you into other areas. So that's why it was a good basis for me.
So how does that intersect with your day job?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Get a lot of inquiries from Ireland, funnily enough, and do a lot of meetings in Ireland. But yeah, I'm not sitting there all the time thinking, how can I be more Irish, in this conversation or whatever. But it's more your ethos and your basis. So I spend a lot of my time speaking to people who've got no Irish connections. The railway is a national railway. It goes from the north of Scotland down to the bottom of Cornwall. And so if I go to do a meeting in Penzance, they're likely to be all, just because of the way of the world, native Cornwall people. If I go up to the northeast of Scotland in Aberdeen, they're likely to be just from that area. And many of those areas have got a military heritage, which is, fine, that's what they are. And I have to deal with that. And you have to make sure that you're in tune with all of the people that you're seeking to organise. Because when people join the union, we don't say, what do you believe? What colour are you, or what was your heritage? We say, where do you work? And you've got to then say this is the ethos of the union, how can you fit into it? And you've got to be real. People only fit into the union the way they want to. They want you to get them better pay, better conditions. And then some of them will start to become active, some will become politically active, some will be community active. So some people just want the bread and butter, other people want the full deal. So I have to go around dealing with all of that and making sure I respect everyone.
I just want to start by asking, you are one of the Three Hijabis.
Yes.
Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, how did it come about?
So the Three Hijabis were born in the summer of 2021 when the Euros was taking place a year later because of COVID. And we are three hijabi women who between us have, many years experience of fighting oppression and systemic discrimination, who went to watch a match first of all in a bar in London.
Bar.
Yes. So we are, that's myself, Huda, and Shaista Aziz, who's a journalist and used to work in the aid and development sector for many years. And then Amna Abdul Latif, who used to and still does work around feminism, campaigning, working with young people, equalities and anti-racism work. We hadn't seen each other since COVID, and Amna was coming down to London along with her daughters for a weekend out. Happened to be the Euros happened. And Shaista and I said, well, why don't we all meet up? So Shaista is a very keen footballer. Right. And a football fan.
And
she plays football?
She does play football.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
And are you a keen football fan?
I do like spectating, yes.
Right.
I like watching. No.
Fair enough.
And how long have you been into football?
I would say I've always loved watching it, but I've really not started kind of paying attention until probably about 5 years ago.
Right. So did you have a team?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't have a
So
team.
you were all in the bar.
So we all
Three hijabis going to
Three
a bar.
hijabis going to a bar.
Yeah.
Literally, that is what the tweet that Shaista put out that went viral.
Right.
And in it, she talks about why the three hijabis go into a bar and why we feel that the England team has, in its previous iterations, did not speak to us as women of colour, and why we feel so passionately about supporting the current squad and the management.
Do you have, in terms of your mission and what you're doing now, like what are you focused on?
We're completely about taking up space in the cultural space and sports in particular, because we feel sports is probably the most democratic place you can be, an inclusive space you can be as a citizen, as an ordinary person, without having to pass many, many hurdles and barriers. And we believe in the power of stories, in terms of our existence as human beings. And so our stories have to reflect us, and these spaces have to reflect who we are. And we need to make sure that these spaces, cultural spaces, sporting spaces, allow for people like me, you, all sorts of people to say, I belong here. And I can see people like me here. And we firmly believe in that it needs to be owned by the people, not the powerful companies that run and make money out of our commitment and love for sport and culture. And that's where we are.
How do you avoid becoming kind of national treasury? Do you know what I mean? Like, because there is an agenda that you set out there where you make football, and I'm thinking really of the national team, that you say, we're going to reclaim that. There's also the possibility that they claim you, right? So they say, see how wonderful Britain is, see how wonderful England is. Oh, we got the little hijabis have come. Isn't that nice?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And then you become like a national treasure.
Yes.
Like, see?
Yes.
See? They don't mind our racism.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering how you navigate that.
Well, it's really funny you should say that, because there have been ample opportunities when that risk was very possible. And all three of us were very, very clear from the outset. We're not interested in being famous. We're not interested in, the way in which we called on the FA to meet with us, to receive our petition, and to do something about banning racists from football for life. And there have been many opportunities where we could have been co-opted, and it would have been really easy. And, we were told, we have people in high places like yourself who have said, we were told, people who met with us from the FA were told to handle us. So, yeah, well, that's a very nice way of putting it. That we are extremely clear about our values and what we want. We want a place for all peoples to be in football and sports. We're not interested in 5 minutes of fame. We don't care about endorsing anything. We're not, our commitment is to our values, our faith, and our belief in people having the right to enjoy life. And as Amna used to say, these people can go to work without having to be racially abused. The footballers have a right to go to work without being harassed and racially abused. Like, it's a right we all have.
So, Jeremy, you've had this wild ride, right? You stand in 2015 to make sure that the argument is put about austerity, but you don't imagine when you are going to do it, that you're actually going to win that argument. You become the leader of a party, the parliamentary wing of which proves incredibly resistant to your victory. You go through quite significant accusations around anti-Semitism. You increase the vote share in 2017 and the number, then electorally get hammered in 2019, then get effectively expelled from the party in a way, not formally expelled, but suspended. You can't stand against the party that you've been a member of for ages and win. I'm just wondering if there are 2 or 3 lessons that you have learned from that roller coaster ride, things that you would have done differently, ways in which you understand things now that you maybe didn't before.
I stood in 2015, as you remember, with enormous difficulty on even getting the nominations to be a candidate. We needed 35 MPs to nominate, and we eventually got 36, but that was less than a minute before the close of nominations. So it was a very, very close run thing. And probably half of those that nominated me did so because of pressure from their own constituency Labour parties, or because they felt that at the very least the political platform that I was outlining, essentially the anti-austerity one, deserved to get a message and deserved to get a hearing. I don't think any of them really thought I was going to win.
Nor did you, right?
Exactly. I was about to say that. Neither did I. To begin with, I thought we would be lucky to sort of get a hearing and we'd be able to take part in these debates, and that would help to build the left in the party. And then after a very short time, it became pretty obvious to me that there was massive support.
I remember sitting with someone who now works for Keir Starmer saying, I'm really confused. The CLPs we thought would go for Miliband are going for Corbyn on first pref. So there was something that was, you tapped into something that was there with existing members.
Fair point, because it's often said to me, people say quite an accusing way, you only won because you've got all these non-members to vote for you. So it's actually, that's not correct. Look at the figures. Yes, they were voted largely for me, but we would have won anyway, albeit by a small majority. Anyway, that campaign grew very, very rapidly, and with it, huge demands, and we developed policy and put out a lot of policy statements. After I was elected in September 2015, I remember that night writing in my diary, 2 days later, saying, I feel a bit like a beach whale. I've been washed up on a beach, having had a great swim. The problem is all my friends and supporters are still out in the ocean. And in between, we've got a huge hostile force known as the Parliamentary Labour Party. So they were a problem from day one, in that the shadow cabinet can only be appointed from within the Parliamentary Labour Party, both Lords and Commons Parliamentary Labour Party. Party. I didn't have much support there. And I remember the first Prime Minister's question time I went to, I looked around, the chamber was absolutely ram-packed. Every seat for MPs was taken and every seat in the gallery was taken as well. I don't know about the political makeup of the people in the gallery, but I do know the political makeup of the people in the chamber. And I looked around and as I'm waiting for it to start, counted 18 people who supported me out of 650. So it felt a bit lonely. And then we had a whole lot of problems, including big attempt at early removal of me in December 15. Then we had the coup in the summer of 16. And then we had the second leadership contest, which we won by an even larger majority than the first one. And I remember saying to the Parliamentary Labour Party, get over it. The party members have voted and they've set the direction in which this party should go. Are you going to set yourselves at war with the party? Well, they did. They set themselves at war with the party. We then went into the 2017 election with Labour support at, from memory, 24%. Actually, the same as Sunak went into this election campaign on. I went into my office that day and we heard the election was announced. It was a bit of a surprise to everybody, whatever hindsight they tell you. And I said, okay, everybody in the office, whole team, every single person, whatever their job, had to come. I said, I want everybody in there. We have a very quick, very short meeting. And I said, it's like this. The election's been called. Everybody knows it's going to be hard and it's going to be difficult. We're not apologising. We're not retreating. We're not giving in. We're going out now to campaign like we've never campaigned before all over the country. We're doing this because we want to live in a different society, in a better world. And that resonated. And we got very, very close to winning in 2017. Indeed, the vote we got was the highest this century for the Labour Party, but the electoral system, if you like, didn't help us very much in that respect. I wanted community organising from the very beginning, and I felt that it would be possible to work with the existing structure and officials within the party, explain what I wanted to do, and that they would work with me on it. I did not and do not believe in dictatorial leadership. Many people say that was a fundamental mistake on my part, but I wanted to build a legacy of democracy and participation. The membership went up to 500,000, and ultimately, just by 2019, was almost 600,000, largest party in Europe. But there was huge opposition to the concept of community organising, not because they particularly disliked the individuals that had been recruited to do the community organising. They didn't like the direction of travel in which I was setting the party as a PT equivalent, if you like, as a community organised base. And we wasted far too much time arguing with people in the party about that. And that, I regret that, because I think we, in many ways, too nice to people.
We are here with Faiza Shaheen, who was the independent candidate for Chingford and Woodford Green and formerly the Labour candidate for Chingford and Woodford Green. How are you doing, Faiza?
Yeah, all right.
So you stood as an independent. You got around the same number of votes as the Labour candidate that was put in your place. So you both got around 12,000 votes.
12,500, yeah.
So how was that campaign? And then how did it feel to be stood on the stage, or I don't know if you were at the count, and see Ian Duncan Smith win again?
Yeah, the campaign was amazing. And there was so many local people, especially local mums, I think were just so angry about the way I was treated. You know, knowing what it's like when you've just had a baby, and themselves having experiences of employers basically deleting their job or whatever while they're on maternity leave, and just coming out, being with me on school gates. Just so many people that got involved that said they'd never been involved before. Local young people, people that had been in the Labour Party for 65 years, left the Labour Party to support me. It felt very different in 2019. We had a really great campaign. There was a lot of people coming in from like Hackney and Walthamstow to support, whereas this time it was the majority was local people and, you know, local teachers and nurses, and it just was so special in that way. And then Reni O'Sullivan joined in, which was incredible, again through local connections. He lives not far from me in Woodford, and it was very joyful. It was very grassroots. It felt very hopeful and different. We did this incredible night, my just best night of politics, from one of my best nights of my life. I asked Reni O'Sullivan if he would come and do a pool night, and people could come, listen to me a bit, listen to him a bit, put their name in the hat, and he would play 3 frames against people. And we did it in this pub close to where I grew up, and the high street is completely falling apart. So it was really important for me to take the buzz there. And loads of people came, and it was just such a different mix. Ronnie O'Sullivan's really, really big in Pakistan, and I'm half Pakistani. And so there was loads of like British Pakistanis that came locally as well. Some of them were uncomfortable about being in the pub, but they came.
Like, we'll do it for Ronnie the Rocket. We'll do it.
Yeah. And it was just lovely. Like, it was so wonderful.
Faiza, did anybody who you respect, who's close to you, say, don't stand?
Yeah, of course.
Because you'll split the vote or whatever. Or could you have stood as a Green? Or I'm just wondering what the options were. Yeah. And then how you respond to that now.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of talk about that. And of course, it just played on my mind a lot and still does. But what was really obvious from our conversations on the doorstep was that a lot of the people that voted for me wouldn't have voted Labour at all. So loads of people who were really angry about the way I was treated said they were going to vote Green if I didn't stand or just write my name in. Loads of people, they'd lost the Muslim vote, and anyone that cared about Gaza had just gone, especially as I wasn't going to be there. They were not going to vote Labour anyway. And then these Tory switchers that weren't going to vote Labour because it was too much for them to go that far, but then to vote independent for a local girl, they felt, okay, yeah, we can do that. We had a higher turnout because of our campaign. So we would have got the same turnout as other places. They didn't think anyone would notice if they switched me out for another brown woman.
Yeah, they used to call it postbox, just paint it red, and there's certain constituencies.
It's never that seat.
And I think I want to fess up as I'm your friend. And I was one of the people who was, I don't think I told you not to stand, but was like, talk me through this. But my concern was just like fully for your mental health and like well-being. And I had that concern before you decided to stand again as a Labour candidate. And I guess we touched on Diane. I think one of the reasons so many women and mums felt so moved by your Newsnight interview and what happened was that like a lot of people viscerally felt that experience of discrimination and bullying. Without like going too deep, like how did it feel as like a Muslim woman, a woman of colour, a working class woman who wasn't in the Labour Party from when she was 14 and doing Labour students at uni? Like, it was pretty tough on you. Like, how do you deal with that stuff and keep going?
I think I'm still processing it a bit because everything happened so quickly and we had to make decisions under a lot of pressure. But yeah, it was really horrible when they were coming for me those days. And, these people will have children. They'll know Zayan was like 15 weeks old and trying to nurse him still. And it was really horrible. Also, just to dismiss all those years of work and commitment and the fact that, so I was on the picket line this morning at my old school, the teachers are striking, and the teachers were like, it would have meant so much to our pupils to have someone that went to their school represent them, and they just feel like angry and upset by it all, and on a personal level, of course, but also just for our community. And we were going to get rid of Ian Duncan Smith, like we were going to get rid of him. He actually said to me, it was terrible how you've been treated.
Oh, God. Man, that's the kind of sympathy you can do without.
No, but also it's like, really? Even the Tories out. I mean, it was when
I know we don't agree on anything, but...
I mean, they had the same with Diane. There were loads of Tories being like, well, I mean, the way they're treating Diane, and you're like, this is where we're at.
Hey, Reni, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm so excited to be here today.
We're excited to have you.
Two people who I hold in much high regard.
Oh, well, thank you.
Back at you.
Back at you.
Yeah.
Likewise. I wanted to ask you, where did you get your politics from? Was it your folks? Was it your upbringing? Was it in the air? Was it in the water?
They do put socialism in the water now.
They do? Well, they should.
They should.
They
put
should.
It in the water, Thames, not all this poo.
Yeah.
Oh, God's sake.
I have a story about being really young, like under the age of 5, and trying to give away my McDonald's Happy Meal to somebody who was unhoused and being heavily chastised. And I was like...
Who were you chastised by?
My mother, of course. Okay. I was like, but like, we've got food at home. So maybe we could say that it was dyed in the wall. Maybe there's theories that I'm neurodivergent. I do have a strong sense of justice. I don't know. It hasn't been diagnosed. But also I think like maybe it's just being informed by somebody who grew up in the inner city.
Where did you grow up?
Well, part of it was in southeast London, Woolwich, and then part of it was in Tottenham.
Okay, also
good.
Good.
Up in Tottenham. North.
Up north.
Up north.
That's what we Londoners call up
Yeah.
north, Gary. Tottenham or
I know.
Edmonton.
And you're all very sad.
So I went on a lot of demos when I was 15, 16 about the Iraq war. And I felt very defeated by that because I was on the streets with millions of people and we still bombed Iraq and like killed loads of people. Like, what was your experience of doing that, organising around tuition fees or around Tory cuts?
I remember going on the demos, the big one that the National Union of Students organised. NUS were great about that, actually. They worked with student unions across the country, got loads of people on coaches down. Then I remember heading back up to where I was studying, and there was like hundreds of us that went down.
Where were you studying?
I was studying in a city called Preston in the northwest of England. I was there for like 4 years, ended up sticking around in the student movement, was elected student union president. And I remember when we returned back from the demo, like we were like all affronted by this media coverage of, let's say, the worst behaviour. A lot of people wrote us off and were like quite hostile towards us. And that's when I realised, oh, okay, let me start quickly losing my faith in the press. Like, let me start quickly losing my faith in like media narratives, because it's becoming evident to me that sometimes standing up for what I believe in, which I don't think was a radical proposition.
Nope.
Like, don't triple tuition fees, is going to actually have you demonized. So I learned that at like age 20. But I was writing the other day and I was really thinking about how like Black Lives Matter has really bookended my career, you know, from the murder of Trayvon Martin in like 2012. And then, you know, what happened with my work in 2020. The murder of Trayvon Martin, which I guess I'll just explain for your listeners in case they don't know, but he was like a teenager who was murdered in the States, of course, walking home with some Skittles and like a soft drink. And,
iced tea.
Yeah, and he was deemed a threat by a man called George Zimmerman and shot him after they had a like little altercation.
Zimmerman was like a have a go Harry. He sees him, he assumes it's a gated community, he assumes that he's a criminal, he chases him. And there's basically no way that Trayvon Martin gets home that night. Either he gets hunted down by Zimmerman or he fights back. But what he's not allowed to do is go to the shops, get his Skittles, get his iced tea and walk home. Zimmerman stops him. They get into a tussle. Zimmerman shoots him.
Yeah, it was probably the first spark of the BLM movement.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it wasn't a police killing. It was a vigilante killing.
I think that was a formative moment for the global Black Lives Matter movement. And that was something that really moved me. I remember writing about it on my blog at the time. You know, so I kind of see myself as part of a generation that is really like comfortable and used to protest. We watched infrastructure crumble when the Conservatives, I know it was a coalition government, but it was basically a Conservative government, elected right at the beginning of my adulthood. And I've watched the social safety nets and, you know, social housing just be completely dismantled. I still live in London. I don't live far from where I grew up. Everything is worse. And post-election, I was saying to my friend, I feel like the student movement is literally like the Bullingdon Club of the left. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Good analogy. It's not wrong.
If you're not, pay attention to whoever's involved, because you'll be hearing from those people in 10, 15 years, including me. I was actually one of the people.
You're saying you're a member of the Bullingdon Club of the Left.
I am. And I think my ascent was unusually early for somebody involved in the student movement, because I was grabbing headlines maybe 5-6 years after I finished. Usually you hear from people a decade after they've been involved in the student movement, the ones who go off to be Labour MPs, of course.
As soon as they get that seat.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
When you start hearing
well, they're usually just like dutifully hanging around the party, being
jobs
good and obedient and stuff.
Yeah.
And to be fair, some people who came out of that are good, right?
They are good. I'm not dissing them.
Well, hang on. A lot of them aren't. Most of them are.
I think it's just a statement of fact. And I think it's just something we have to be mindful of, especially in Labour, because we've spoken about this. I think the party culture is very conservative and very biased toward insiders. And like almost regardless of your politics in Labour, it's a bit like, well, if we can't place you, if you're not known to us, you know, you're in this faction and you came up doing this, I think that is quite threatening and challenging to Labour. So yeah, I think you can be an amazing left-wing Labour MP and have come up through student movement NUS. You can be a Blairite. But the fact that now the trade union movement is much less of a feeder for Labour than the student movement, I think it's just something for us to be mindful of as we try and understand and navigate politics and the media. And I would say This batch of MPs, I was like, oh, wow, I sort of know, like, as in follow on Instagram or Facebook, a lot of MPs. And same with political journalists. And that's a pretty small pool for everyone to be swimming in. Hi, Joe. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Good to see you. How's things?
Yeah, pretty good. Really excited to have you on the show. I think for a lot of us, what happened in August sort of seemingly triggered by the tragic killings of 3 young girls in Southport, it felt like something came out of nowhere. And I guess one of the reasons we were really keen to talk to you is that I'm guessing it wasn't such a surprise to you. Can you explain what you think happened, how much it was connected to the killings, and like who the people were that we saw out on the streets in like dozens of areas across the UK?
Really sadly, it didn't make it any less shocking, but it wasn't surprising. You know, we at Hope Not Hate for some years had been warning that something like this was going to happen, especially around accommodation, housing people who are seeking asylum. The scale took everyone by surprise. It was the third explosion, if you will, of this wellspring of anger in British society at the moment. This was not long after the general election where Nigel Farage's reform got 14.3% of the vote, you know, over 4 million votes, which is the largest, probably radical right, far right vote share of the post-war period. The riots came a few days after Tommy Robinson or Stephen Lennon had a demonstration in Trafalgar Square that had somewhere between 20 and 30,000 people on it. That was probably certainly the largest far-right demonstration in years in the UK. And then we have the riots, which is the largest explosion of far-right violence in the post-war period. These 3 events are all ostensibly symptoms of this kind of wellspring of anger and resentment and hatred bubbling away under British society. What was really horrifying about the riots, but also, I guess, interesting, maybe that's not the right word, but they reflected what the modern far-right looks like, right? And by that, I mean, yes, we've analysed thousands of hours of footage and images to find out who people are, who was organising what. Yes, there was people from small far-right groups like Britain First, Patriotic Alternative, former English Defence League members, etc. on these events. But there was no single group or person that organised all of these demonstrations. Rather, what it is, it mimics what we call the post-organisational far-right. And by that, I just mean, in addition to those traditional groups that has a leader, a regional structure, branch members, and all those sorts of things, is this massive decentralised network of thousands of individuals that are engaging with and creating far-right material, primarily online, but as we've seen in the riots, can happen offline. And it's like a school of fish that moves around the internet. You know, there's no leader, you're not a member of anything. While there's not a leader, there are figureheads, people like Tommy Robinson, that direct the weather of this school of fish, if you will, around the internet. So when you looked at the riots, that 7-day period, many of them looked very similar. They would chant the same things at the events, similar sorts of targets. They would have the same banners, the same poster styles, which gives the impression that there's someone organising it all, but it wasn't. It was individuals locally, ad hoc, creating their own events, but they were somehow linked into these overlapping online spaces. So the riots very much echoed what the far right looks like. And it's why I think lots of the media got it wrong when they said, these people aren't far right. They're not a member of anything. You don't need to be a member of anything anymore to either consume or engage with a form of far right activism. And for me, the moment you turn up outside a mosque and start chanting racist slogans or you throw a brick, you're engaging in far right activism, even if you don't have a membership card for anything, you know?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I found quite concerning and upsetting about some of the mainstream media coverage of this sense of like, well, these people aren't all racist or on the far right, even though they're trying to burn people alive and threatening physical acts of violence. I think it was really interesting you said about the shift to a more decentralized structure. Am I right in saying that 20 years ago, you might have been a member of the British National Party and you would have, had a local branch and maybe an organizational structure. And now you're saying that there isn't one group or one umbrella and it's much more fragmented, but that people are organizing or consuming the same content on social media. So the people that took to the streets might not have known each other, or they would have known each other from online forums. Like, what is there? Who were the people that were out on the streets?
You're absolutely right. 20 years ago, or prior to the digital age, if you will, if you wanted to engage in far-right activism actively, you either had to go through a phone book and call people that you think might be involved, or you might have to go to a city to maybe go and you've heard that there's a street stall where they're handing out leaflets. If you want to get hold of really extreme books or material like Holocaust Denial, you'd have to write a letter to somewhere in America that would send you. All of these things were hurdles to far-right activism. Now, of course, as long as you've got internet connection, you can sit anywhere in the world and you can consume far-right material at the click of a button. I mean, unfortunately, in some social media platforms serve it up to you, even if you're not looking for it. Traditionally, people would say this person is a member of the far right because they are a member of the National Front or a member of the English Defence League or the BNP. Now, people can sit watching Tommy Robinson videos, become inculcated with really extreme views about Muslims or asylum seekers, and genuinely say, I'm not far right, I'm not a member of anything. And I think that's also, that ease of entry is why so many young people are getting involved. Because if you're 14, you can consume it now without having to go and knock on a door.
Thank you for listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar this year. Your support has meant a lot to us. As always, you can support the podcast in 3 ways. You can join our Patreon community and make a regular gift at overunderpod.com.
Share our social media posts at over_under_pod_ with your comments.
Or recommend a friend to be part of our growing community. And of course, you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it and get notified every time a new episode comes out.
You've been listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar with me, Gary Young, and Carys and Gary.